Welcome everybody. This is Bhante Jagaro. Actually, before we start, Ian, can I get your assistance? My memory is usually there'll be like some people or chats. Do you know how do you see that? I just want to make sure this is actually working.
Yeah, it says it's live. Just means nobody's commented so far.
Okay. Well, that's okay. Well, it'll just be us then. Great. The concern I have is that somehow the link didn't go out to the normal crowd.
It's got all the check marks.
The check marks? Okay. All right.
That you're recording for 47 seconds.
Okay. Well, we'll just go with it. Okay. All right. So, welcome everybody. This is a Wednesday night Empty Cloud Dhamma reflection. My name is Bhante Jagaro. I am a Buddhist monk that's visiting Empty Cloud. I'll be here for about a week and a half, and it's been actually a delight. I just read it 3 days ago, and getting to know the community here, and also new friends, and seeing many old friends as well. So tonight I will give a reflection, share a story, and read a reflection that another monk who I met gave a number of years ago. So first we'll pay homage to the Buddha, and then we'll begin. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. The last time I came to the Empty Cloud Monastery was early in 2023. And not too long after that, I set out on a traditional Buddhist wandering pilgrimage in California. In Thai, the term is called a tudong, and there are other words to describe it, but usually in English, we call it going on a pilgrimage. It's probably the closest thing to describe that what we do. And basically, we monks will either go off on our own, or maybe a pair or three at a time, and we will wander. We'll go from one place to another, and we will travel on foot, and we will accept rides, maybe occasionally. Sometimes monks refuse that, and but we basically allowing life and circumstance to dictate what happens. And during this pilgrimage I did last year, I ended up visiting a small temple in Pacific Grove, California, which is about, hour and a half south of San Francisco. And I got to meet a monk named Khenpo Karten Rinpoche. And so I'm going to show a few slides just so you can have a little visual imagery of what I'm referring to. So this is Khenpo Karten Rinpoche. He's a monk in the Tibetan tradition. and he was very kind to allow me to stay there for the night. And so we actually got to meet each other and talk, and it was actually quite an honor and a privilege, as I soon became to find out. One of the things that I found quite delightful, and I think many Tibetan monastics practice it, but they often practice an kind of act of humility in the Theravada world. They have kind of a seniority based on age of monasticism. So if I am, let's say, so Bhante Siddhasa, he's a number of years senior to me. He ordained earlier, and so he's my senior. I'm his junior. So I always pay respects to him, right? So for example, I bow down before him. And it was a way that in the Buddha a long time ago kind of set out, kind of a simple way of establishing a seniority system. And in the Tibetan tradition, many of the monastic practitioners cultivate humility, which is actually a very important quality of the mind to develop. And so when I met him, he was, a number of years as a monk, and so I got down to, on the ground to pay respects and to bow to him, and he wouldn't have this. So he was, he got down on the ground, too, and I'm like, well, no, so I started to bow to him, and he started to bow to me, and and it was I'm sure quite a funny scene if anybody was watching, but it was just us two. So it was it was very interesting. I've never experienced that, being a Theravada monk, but it was quite beautiful to witness. And as I got to know him, I started to kind of get a better sense of how do I say this? Like you get to pick up on the kind of joy and enthusiasm in the Buddha's teachings. One of the things I really enjoyed is that he showed me around his temple, and he showed me where he sat to eat his meals, and he had the sliding glass door that he used, and he would open the sliding glass door, and there would be a number of squirrels that would come to the sliding glass door because he liked to feed them. And some of them actually would come inside, and so he actually named the different squirrels, and and later this was after my visit. We've been keeping in touch. He actually showed me kind of recently that he's actually set up little shrines for these squirrels up on the kind of the fence leading around to where his backyard is, so that as the squirrels pass by on the fence, they pass by these squirrel shrines before he gives them the food. Usually they're nuts, for example. So anyways, what I wanted to do is I wanted to first tell you a little bit about Khenpo Karten Rinpoche and kind of meeting him. So one of the things that, when he saw me, I looked like this. I was, carrying my alms bowl. I had a backpack. For those that here at Empty Cloud, they can't quite see this. I'll show you afterwards. But this is how I looked. So I was coming in, and he recognized this, and he went. As time went on, I could tell he's quite delighted that I was practicing in this very traditional way, right? He was just very, very happy about this and very enthusiastic about this. He actually told me that there was a period of time where and I can't remember exactly, he either practiced for a short time in the Burmese tradition or in the Thai tradition in a monastery, and he went to get his old robes and put them on, and I guess I really would like to show the people here, but I guess I'll have to do it afterwards. But he actually put on his robe in the kind of Theravada style, and he wanted to take a picture with me. So this is what it looks like. So, he wanted to this is like a kind of often a way of we try to find bridges of commonality, right? So whenever we meet people with different cultures or different religions, different people from different places, it's always good to try to find ways to, ways of kind of establishing commonality, right? Sometimes we can use food, sometimes we can use a kind of shared history, sometimes we can just use interests, right? A lot of times people in our culture, we talk about sports teams that we might share a liking to, although it can be dangerous because you might like, the wrong team, but at least we can talk about sports that we have a shared interest in. So I want to read a teaching that Khenpo Karten Rinpoche gave. Basically, he gave this back in 2017 when he visited the Bridgewater State Prison. He wanted to teach students there, and so this is basically kind of an adaptation of a teaching he gave in prison that he gave later publicly. So I want to read this to everybody because I thought it was something that I found very inspiring. So this is the words of Khenpo Karten Rinpoche. I want to say a few words for my very dear Dharma brothers here in Boston. It has been quite a few years since my friend Ed introduced me to you, and I'm very happy that we have become friends. Today, along with speaking about my root guru, Kyabje Sangye Tenzin Rinpoche, I wanted to say a few words about the kind of attitude that can help when obstacles and bad situations arise. In general, life forms have various sufferings because of their own particular karma. That is natural. Hell beings have suffering of heat and cold. Spirits have suffering of hunger and thirst. Animals suffer from being used and from eating each other. Human beings experience suffering of birth, sickness, aging, and death. Demigods suffer from fighting. Worldly gods suffer from such things as falling from their state when they die. Suffering of the human world pales in comparison to suffering experienced in the three worst realms of existence. Yet, the hopes and fears of human beings are stronger than those in other realms of existence, which causes them to suffer even more. The stronger our attachment to hopes and aversion to fears, the stronger we will be afflicting our emotions, and the stronger the afflicting emotions, the greater the suffering we will experience. As long as they wander in the cycle of death and rebirth, called samsara, no one is free from suffering. Many people, when you say suffering, view it as something completely negative and faulty to get rid of. The Kadampa Geishis, however, who practice holy dharma as it should be practiced, don't view suffering as something to get rid of. Rather, they willingly accept it. Suffering actually has many good qualities. For instance, experiencing suffering yourself can cause you to have more compassion for others. When you experience suffering, it uses up your bad karma. It can cause you to renounce the suffering of samsara and develop a sincere wish for liberation. It makes you want to avoid creating bad karma. It stops you from being arrogant. Suffering can have all these positive effects and more. If we don't want suffering, we must abandon its causes, the delusions. Deluded afflictive emotions arise from being mistaken about things, which in turn is caused by ignorance, not seeing things as they actually are. It is very important for us to abandon all causes of suffering. We should try not to let ourselves get too mentally disturbed by slight physical suffering. We may experience physical difficulty as a result of karma and obstacles that are out of our control, but the mental attitude we develop in response always depends on us. Since what I'm talking about today is Dharma related, I want to give a brief account of my time my root guru spent in prison. I'm going to show a picture of his root guru with him, Sangye Tenzin Rinpoche. I want to give a brief account of my time my root guru spent in prison. In 1959, all of Tibet was seized by Mao Zedong and the Chinese communists. At that time, many innocent Tibetan lamas and tulkus were put in prison. My root guru was also put in prison. All the lamas were put together in one part of the prison. The prison became like a monastery, completely filled with many lamas and monks, but they were beaten and tortured beyond measure every day. Many lamas and tulkus died in prison of starvation. My root guru was in his 30s at the time. He had spent 21 years in prison. During that time, he only practiced Dharma. He focused single-pointedly on nothing else but the practice of love and compassion for others, in a meditation of giving and taking called Tonglen in the Tibetan language. When you give, you mentally send to others your body, possessions, and all the positive actions that you have created or will create in the past, present, and future. You even send it out to undesirable enemies, demons and obstructors, and so on. When you take, you mentally take upon yourself others' pain and suffering, sickness, bad karma, hindrances, and everything negative. Even though you have the wish to take away their suffering, however, this does not mean you will receive all their suffering and bad karma. Rather, because of your strong compassion wanting to take away their suffering, it will destroy all the causes of your own suffering, and you should visualize this happening as soon as you take away the suffering and the causes from others. Your only wish is to take away others' suffering, but the result is that your own suffering is lightened and ultimately eradicated. Because of Rinpoche doing this very practice, the prison naturally became like a retreat house for the Dharma. Many lamas and spiritual masters from the different areas were placed together, so they secretly exchanged teachings with each other and had many discussions about their experiences and realizations of Dharma. Because of this, it became a very good, conducive place for the practice of Dharma. The communist Chinese thought that if they could throw all the lamas in prison, they could wipe out Tibetan Buddhism. Not only was this intention of the Chinese government not achieved, the lamas had found a place that provided many years of unexcelled conditions for the practice of Dharma. Finding the bad conditions to be a blessing in disguise, it became like a spiritual center for them all, and their experience and realization of Dharma grew more and more vast and profound. There were signs around Sangye Tenzin Rinpoche that revealed his realizations. For example, one day, 5 groups of people saw Rinpoche in different places at the same time. Some saw him outside while others saw him meditating inside. Some saw him in the kitchen. Some saw him talking with others. And some saw him drinking tea. He appeared to different people in various aspects at the same time. These were signs of his developing realized qualities of paths and stages of spiritual practice. By the power of his mind, he was able to transform an impure prison into a sacred temple, a Buddha land. Lacking such knowledge, your body could actually be in a holy temple, while, mentally, you're still in prison. In Dharma, it is said that everything arises through the power of your mind. You now have the chance to use your mind in a similar way. Not only does being unhappy and resentful not help, it also harms yourself. After Mao had died, it was announced that the prisoners in Tibet would be released. Around that time, one of the Chinese prison guards said to my root guru, Your time in prison was over days ago. Why have you still not left for your monastery? The guard was a young man who had seen signs of the Rinpoche's spiritual realizations and had developed great faith in him. He had served Rinpoche in prison and had become Rinpoche's very close friend. Rinpoche said very sadly, "Oh, I heard the bad news. If only I had the chance to remain in prison a few more years, then my practice would have probably become fully qualified. In any case, today I want to convey my deepest heartfelt gratitude to the Chinese government. For 21 years, I have stayed in meditation retreat with my food, clothing, bed, and everything kindly provided. In our Kagyu tradition, every monk must do at least 3-month meditation retreat. I had done a 3-year retreat before, but I always wanted to do a longer retreat. But my responsibilities in the monastery had given me absolutely no time for that. Now, I've been able to spend 21 years in retreat. In its true nature, this is a retreat hut, not a prison cell. Today, I give my most sincere thanks to Mao and the Chinese government. Rinpoche even composed a short doha, I might have mispronounced that, a song of spiritual realization about how his practice had been greatly boosted and enhanced by his prison experience. I don't remember it in its entirety, but it was very eloquent and beautiful. In any case, it is very important not to let our mind be disturbed by physical suffering. Physical sickness, frustration, and obstacles are not something newly arisen that have never existed before. It is just the nature of samsara. Buddha called samsara an ocean of suffering. The important thing is that we become able to transform it into happiness, with suffering acting as a causal condition. Bodhisattva Togmi Zangpo said, "When things are good, send it out to all beings. May the benefit and bliss fill all the space. When the things are bad, take away the sufferings of all. May the ocean of samsara be dried up." Patrul Rinpoche said, "If I am sick, that sickness makes me happy. It exhausts the bad karma I previously committed. If I'm not sick, not being sick makes me happy. My virtuous practice will flourish in this life for a long time." At this time, you must be patient and try not to be disturbed no matter what kind of pain, loss, and hardship you encounter. There's no other choice. It doesn't help to just grieve and worry. As said in Guide to the Bodhisattva Conduct, if something can be fixed, why should you be unhappy about it? If something cannot be fixed, how does it help to be unhappy about it? Take this prison, for example. By getting angry with others and causing them to suffer, not only will you harm them, you will also add to your own suffering. You'll be tormented in body and mind both. Instead of it hurting others, it will definitely hurt you yourself. There is no real winning through the force of anger. Better than that is to absorb yourself in love and compassion. Then the ultimate victory will be yours. In the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas, it is said, if you don't conquer the enemy of your own anger, outer enemies will only multiply even if you conquer them. Therefore, it is the practice of Bodhisattvas to control their own mind with the armies of love and compassion. That verse changed my life. When I was young, my mother, uncle, and other family members were killed by the Chinese government. My guru had been put in prison for 21 years, and so forth. Because of this, I was constantly angry at the Chinese government. I thought I should take off my monk's robes and get revenge against the Chinese communists. I was young at the time and had a youngster's mentality. I don't know how I should retaliate. One time, at my father's insistence, I was brought to meet Sangye Tenzin Rinpoche. He had just been released from prison. He handed me a copy of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas and had me read it right then and there. When it came to this verse, I think it's the 22nd, it was like the boiling water of my hatred had been poured into a cool lake of love and compassion, and a balmy feeling of bliss enveloped me. Ever since then, I vowed never to hate and be resentful towards the Chinese people, and I went back to the path of a monk as before. That verse changed my whole life. It is thanks to those words that I am still wearing the robes of a monk today. If Dharma strikes the right point, you don't have to know many teachings for it to captivate your heart and mind. The smallest practice of Dharma can definitely transform your mind. The physical pleasure and pain depend on good and bad karma created in the past, as well as temporary conditions. As for your mind, however, no one else can ever control it. It is always in your hands. If your mind is happy, even if you are in prison, you are not in prison. It is like a sacred temple. If your mind is unhappy, even if you have all the wealth in the world, it won't help. There are many wealthy people these days who are not at all happy. Real happiness must come from the mind. Such happiness arises in dependence upon Dharma practice. There is no other way. If you think in a good way, experiences of hardship and suffering can act as a cause for the positive energy and practice in your mind to increase, as an account of my root guru's time in prison. Geshe Longri Changpa said, "When I see people of bad nature who are oppressed by intense pain and negativity, may I cherish them like coming across a mine of jewels that was extremely difficult to find. When others, out of jealousy, unjustly abuse me, may I take the loss and offer victory to others." Contemplating and meditating as much as you can on extremely blessed instructions like these will be of great benefit. Panchen Losang Chokol Gyaltsen said, "Selfishness is the way that everything gets worse, while cherishing my mothers is the basis for everything good. Bless me to make the yoga of exchange, of my own happiness for the suffering of others, the core of my practice. Therefore, compassionate Guru, bless me, that my wandering mother's harms, hindrances, and suffering, all whatsoever may ripen upon me now, and that by sending my joy and virtue to others, all beings may come to have happiness and bliss. Though beings and lands are filled with evil's fruits, and unwanted sufferings fall like rain, seeing that they exhaust bad deeds' fruits, bless me to take misfortune on the path. In brief, whatever happens, good or bad, may I transform it into the spiritual path, by means of Tonglen, essence of Dharma, and meditate in nothing but blissful mind." There are many very potent teachings like this, which are definitely beneficial to read and meditate upon. When we encounter difficult situations, we should keep a broad perspective. If you are a monk, you are urged to transform bad situations, delusions, and suffering into positive factors for the path of enlightenment, and to be thankful for sickness, demons, obstructors, enemies, and so forth, for being conditioned to purify negative karma. Even if that's not possible, we mustn't let temporary slight physical suffering cause us to become so mentally disturbed that we commit suicide, etc. Real happiness derives from the mind. Happiness of the senses that come from outer pleasures and wealth is a deceptive kind of happiness, like a fish being fooled by the bait on a hook. People believe that the pleasant feelings they experience through their senses are real happiness, that the Buddhist says that is the suffering of change. No matter how much external pleasure we enjoy, it can't dispel inner suffering of the mind. Not only that, because of the hopes and fears it causes, it only adds to our mental suffering. If the mind within is happy, Even without much pleasures and wealth, the mental happiness is conducive to good health, long life, less sickness, and so on. It can bring this kind of direct benefit. Mind is like a king that creates everything. When that is experienced, no person could put you in prison, neither can they control you. It is always under your own control. I will never forget you. We can meet every year. Be happy. Tashi Dalek. Let's acknowledge and say sadhu 3 times. Wait, hold on. Let me put the picture of Rinpoche. Okay. Hold on, let me scroll up. Okay. Trying to get the picture right. Okay. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so going back to StreamYard, I think this is a time, Ian said, we open up for questions, both here in the monastery and online. So if there are any questions, you can please put in the chat, and if anybody here at the monastery has a question, please raise your hand. Yes, there's a question.
I'm just curious what about that talk touched you most.
You have a question about the talk?
I'm curious what about that talk touched you most.
Sometimes it's hard to put into words, but to me, it just felt so genuine and heartfelt, and it also spoke to. So when I started my pilgrimage, I had some questions, that I was hoping that perhaps could be addressed or answered, and I think one of them for me was what to do about you say when you're what to do about very challenging situations, often challenging situations involving other people, but it could be any kind of challenging situation, and so that was in my mind. And so when I heard about, when I read this teaching by Khenpo Karten Rinpoche about Sangye Tenzin Rinpoche, I hope I'm pronouncing I don't think I'm pronouncing his names correctly, so please, I apologize. But when I heard about his story, it just, even though I never met him, and just hearing just the basic outlines of what happened, it's like it just shot through time, and there was something about it that really was like, there's a huge teaching here, and so I think it really, it just made a really big impact on me. So, and of course, meeting Khenpo Karten Rinpoche, and this is somebody that he knew, and it was one of his root gurus, that. Is somebody real? It's kind of like, for today, Bhante Sudaso mentioned something very touching to me. Hearing him, he was describing how one of the practices he very much enjoys is bowing, particularly bowing to the Buddha image. And the reason why he likes bowing to the Buddha image is because he's so appreciative of the Buddha's teachings. Right. So even though he's never met sort of historical Buddha, in a sense, there's a connection there because of that intense gratitude, right? And so there was something kind of similar that I felt, even though I never met this monk. Um, just how he lived his life. His example sent some sort of a current through me. Yes.
When you went on Tudong, did you lay down?
Did I?
Is the one of the Tudong rules? I think I've heard is that monks can choose not to lay down.
Oh, okay. So the question is, when I was on this Tudong last year, did I lie down to sleep, I assume, or just lie down ever? Yeah, right. So it's a good question. So Tudong in Thai is related, it's based on the word Dutanga. And the Dutanga are 13 ascetic practices that the Buddha gave monastics to optionally take on to further develop spiritually. And one of those Dutanga practices is actually to not lie down. Right? And so the short answer is no, I didn't take that on. In part because the Dutanga practices themselves are sort of, how do you say, they're each one is like a practice in and of itself, and the Tudong in Thai just refers more of going on this on a pilgrimage, right? That itself is a Dutanga practice, one of the things, actually, I remember talking with somebody about this. He had this other person had a similar question. He's like, did you take on this other practice, or did you take on all 13 Dutanga practices? And I was saying, well, actually, given this is my first pilgrimage, just doing it was a Dutanga in and of itself. There's no guarantee of food. You're walking many miles a day. It was easily the most physically arduous 2 months of my life. It probably wasn't an accident at the very end. I got really sick. Fortunately, there was a layperson that took care of me. I actually, in the first couple of weeks, my right knee was giving out. I actually thought I might have to stop, and then fortunately it healed enough for me to continue. And later on, my left Achilles heel, I think it was my left, could be my right. One of them was really acting up kind of similarly. Of course, blisters and that's just putting aside all the kind of day-to-day kind of adventures that happen. I remember there was one time where it was about halfway through, and I was on this kind of towards the end of the evening and making camp, this kind of lonely intersection, because I couldn't quite find a more private place to lay down for the evening, and I was cold, hungry, exhausted, and a number of things didn't turn out the way I thought it was going to turn out that day, and disappointed in many things. And I remember just being just as Khenpo Karten Rinpoche very eloquently said, my mind was just going to a downward spiral, and I was feeling miserable, and I was like, why am I doing this? This is the worst idea in the world. And it took me a while to, wait a minute, kind of pull myself out. Wait a minute, okay, no, this is dukkha. This is actually my job. This is our job as Buddhist practitioners, to actually, instead of feeling resentful about dukkha, to turn away, trying to get rid of dukkha, it's actually to turn towards it, to embrace it, to it, and learn from it, right? And so yeah, I remember that evening, just like, this is the worst idea. What am I doing? So So the short answer is no. I didn't take on this lying down practice. Many monks actually take on the not lying down practice, independent. So they'll, for example, be in a monastery and they'll say, for this month or for these 3 months, maybe for this year, I'm not going to lie down. There was actually a time recently that for a night decided to, just for one night decided to take this on, and you can still go to sleep. It's just you just basically lay against the wall, but it's definitely not comfortable, right? And the point is to figure out, okay, how can I sort of make best use of this? How can I develop a sense of alertness and mindfulness? How can I develop patience, with the physical discomfort that this will entail. Yeah. So.
It seems to me that it would be very difficult to be skillful in choosing which rules to follow, and it seems really I would be caught up confused, like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right, I got to do it all the way, and if I screw up one day, it's like, well, let's just forget it and give up.
Okay. So the question is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is basically, the question is about if I wonder if I can use this skillfully, because I feel that if I were to try to use these ascetic practices, I'd want to take them all on, or take a lot of them on, do it perfectly, and if I don't do it perfectly, then I just want to give up everything. Did I get it right, or maybe?
And, yes, but in regard to Tudong and also monastic life generally.
Okay. With regards to, in particular, in regards to Tudong and monastic life, it's kind of like, if I were to become a monk, then I want to do it right. I want to do it perfectly. And if I'm a monk and I'm going to Tudong, I want to do the Tudong right and perfectly, right? And that's actually a not uncommon view that many monks have, or many people thinking about monasticism have. And actually there's a positive aspect to it, right? Because one can have a lot of respect, a lot of gratitude for the tradition. One can have a lot of respect for the examples set before you with very great monks or nuns, monastics, right? And you want to respect that, right? So you want to kind of live up to that ideal, right? So it has a positive aspect to it, right? We need ideals, and the Buddha, before he became the Buddha, had incredible ideal, right? He wouldn't have become the Buddha unless he had this really strong ideal, right? He wasn't willing to settle for, profound meditation experiences and profound happiness. He wanted, what's the end of suffering? He wanted to really know what is the end of suffering also, And so he had an incredible ideal. So that's one. Just recognize there is a very positive aspect to that. At the same time, it also can be a great obstacle, right? I think you're recognizing that, right? And so it's worth recognizing that maybe some of our tendencies to have ideals can prevent us from doing things, can actually be very beneficial. Before I was a monk, there's this teacher, a lay teacher that I had. Her name was Narayan. She taught at the Cambridge Meditation Center, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and she was given this teaching. I think it was really great. She was, I think, relatively young, and one of her teachers basically came up to her one day and said, Narayan, you're going to make lots and lots of mistakes. And she kind of was taken aback by this, like what? And she said later, she was like, actually, that was a really good teaching. And so she actually told that to a group of us, and I was one of them. And at the time, I had a very kind of similar response. I was kind of taken aback by this, and like, what kind of teaching is that, right? But as I've later on, as time went on, I've actually realized that actually that was a really good teaching, and I think it's because it can help us ameliorate some of that idealism, right? It's not to say that we should try to make mistakes. I mean, it's to recognize for those that have maybe a tendency to err on idealism and perfection, to be open to becoming somebody that makes mistakes, maybe even catastrophic mistakes, is perhaps a lesson that's willing to be undertaken, right? And so that's part of the reason why sometimes we can be driven to perfection and idealism, because we're so afraid of the mistakes, right? Yeah, so being part of this is that we don't know how things are going to turn out. We could try going into monasticism, we try taking on a Tudong practice, try taking on the Dhutanga practice, and we might fail, right? Or we might do something embarrassing, right? I remember actually being, when I was sharing, how I was that one day I was feeling really sorry for myself on this pilgrimage, and I actually felt part of it. I was feeling embarrassed. I'm like, I knew it wasn't that bad, but yeah, I was still feeling really sorry for myself, and I'm like, gosh, can't I get over this? So it was like, why am I feeling so miserable? Even though this, it's not like I had like a broken leg and dying of dysentery or anything. It was just a very unpleasant evening. It's like, why am I so miserable, right? But it's like, oh, okay, I still have, there's still likes, there's still dislikes, there's still greed, hatred, and delusion in the mind. Okay, all right, this is what we have to practice with, right? So I hope I can just give you some encouragement and to be willing to, the Tonga practice are a great ideal, but perhaps even greater than that is the practice of being willing to become become somebody who makes a mistake. Yeah, that can be in a greater Dhutanga practice. So. Okay, so there are no other questions. So I think we'll wrap up now. Do we do anything special when we wrap up, or we just say goodbye? Or okay, let's do another sadhu. Okay, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. All right, goodbye, everybody. End stream.